Welcome, everybody, to episode number 41 of the Blazer Victory Podcast. This is your co-host, John Duncan, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Steve Irvine. And Steve, it's game week, buddy. You ready to, as they say, let the toe meet leather in a couple of days down in Montgomery?
Yeah. I mean, I'm ready to sit up high and watch it. I don't want to be back down there doing the toe meat leather stuff, but no, I'm ready. I mean, I think everybody is. I mean, I think it's been, especially with the way last year was just such a weird year for everybody. I mean, everybody
Right.
involved, and just kind of ready to get out there and just go sort of forget about some things and just play football, and watch football, and that's yeah, just gonna be some fun times.
Definitely. And it's going to go down this Wednesday evening at 6:30 p.m. Central Time at the Crampton Bowl in Montgomery. Our UAB Blazers meet the Jacksonville State Gamecocks. And it'll be televised on ESPN, nationally televised. And also you can listen to it on Jocks 94.5 and hear David Crane, Steve Irvine, Trey Ragland and company again. And I believe they start their coverage at 5:30 with Landrum Roberts. But definitely looking forward to just another game. And, it's game week. I'm hyped. I know you're hyped. And I'm sure we've even got a few Jacksonville State fans listening to us because I know, me personally, I've got a bunch of friends that are alums from Jacksonville State. So it's going to be a fun game. We haven't played each other in a while. I believe the last time that UAB played Jacksonville State was back in 2005. And they've only met 5 times. UAB has won the last 3 meetings. But, yeah, they haven't met since 2005. So it's going to be a little awkward because, for those that don't know, Coach Clark was, graduate from Jacksonville State, and he coached at Jacksonville State. So, there's going to be a lot of familiarity between both of these programs because, head coach John Gross at Jacksonville State, he coached under Bill Clark. They've been friends for a long time. So, man, this is going to be a good game for sure.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's a lot. There's so many. Guys that just connections. The pretty much all of Coach Clark's coaching staff has at one time been at
Yep.
at Jacksonville State. Most of it under him, but there was still there's other kind of some others that been there under Gross too, and so yeah, it's and there's honestly there's a lot of Jacksonville State people are probably still a little bit upset that of the way Coach Clark left there, and
Yeah.
after a year, and even though they're very happy with Coach Gross and what's gone on since then, but it's just and with Coach Clark grew up really near there, and his father still lives near there, and so there's a lot going on here, and I guarantee you, and I know this for 100% fact. Both Coach Clark and Coach Gross are going to be real happy on Thursday morning if this thing's over with. One way or another. Of course, the winner's going to be a lot happier than the other, but they're both going to be happy to have it in the rearview mirror and move on to the next thing.
Definitely. And, and I mentioned earlier that they're really, good friends. And I believe Coach Gross during his press conference said that, he hadn't talked to Coach Clark since like June. So,
yeah,
they're definitely going to be looking forward to this game being over. But let's talk a little bit about Gross and just the job he's done for Jacksonville State in that program. This is going to be his 8th year with Jacksonville State. He does have an overall record of 68-21, which is actually the best 89 game start in Jacksonville State history. So I'm just doing really big things for that program. And I mean, as we just mentioned, he's familiar with Clark. He worked under him in the 2013 season before Clark ended up, taking the UAB job and starting there in 2014. And Gross has been there since then. We look at Jacksonville State, and Steve, I was going to talk to you a little bit about this too. Jacksonville State played, I believe, 3 games last fall, and then they played a full spring season just recently this spring. So what do you think about that? Does that kind of give Jacksonville State an advantage, saying, hey, they just played literally a couple months ago? Do you think there is an advantage there for Jacksonville State? Because I did, kind of hear Clark during his press conference kind of hint that he thinks that could be an advantage for Jacksonville State, having just played, not just too recently.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt it's an advantage. I mean, you're looking at their their last game they played in the spring was May 2nd when they lost to Delaware in the second round of the playoffs. And then, 3 months, literally 3 months, almost to the day later, they're starting fall camp. So it's a lot of continuation there. You get some time to rest. You get 3 months to rest and before you get started back into it. So no, I think it's certainly advanced early in the season. I mean, I think Coach Clark had a good point. When he was talking about it, that maybe later in the season. I think Coach Gross might even mention his too that maybe later in the season it's gonna be play a role. You're gonna be a little worn down because it is tough. I mean, it's tough to do that, and but I think early in the season, it's I think it certainly is an advantage because you're a little sharper than just teams that hadn't played since December or November or whenever your season ended or so I think that certainly is a little bit of an advantage. But early in the season, I think it's an advantage. But it's just it sort of is what it is at this point. I mean, I think the one thing that's different in the opener, it's a little different because even though you're a little sharper, you're still both teams are pretty kind of beat up after fall camp. That's what always killed me when people talk about, well, this is week one, they'll be fresh. Well, they just practice hard for 4 weeks,
Yeah, they go at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're talking about like in week 4, say, people go, well, they've had 4 weeks of going at it hard. Well, no, they've had 8 weeks of going at it hard,
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of that, going on too for both teams. But I think that once it's kicked off, you just play the game.
Definitely. Well, let's just talk a little bit about Jacksonville State. Now, as we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of familiarity between both programs. Really, the styles are similar. Jacksonville State loves to, they're physical up front on both sides of the ball. They love to establish the run game on the offensive side of the ball, and they pride themselves in stopping the run on the defensive side of the ball, which is really familiar to what Clark and company like to do on the UAB side. So it's really going to be interesting to see what happens this Wednesday night down in the Crampton Bowl. We can kind of look just at the stats from the Gamecock offense from the 2020 season. Rushing wise, they're averaging a little under 190 yards per game. Through the air, they're averaging 195 yards per game. In total offense, they're averaging right around 384 yards per game. So, I mean, really good offense. Now, they do rely heavily on their quarterback, Zerrick Cooper, who is actually making his return. He got hurt during last fall in I believe the FIU game that they beat FIU. Yeah, I believe he got hurt.
Broke his leg. Yeah, he broke his leg against FIU and was unable to play the rest of the fall and didn't play at all in the spring season. So him being back. And you look at him too, and yes, they're his philosophy, Coach Gross's philosophy. He was offensive coordinator under Coach Clark, and we all know what that looks like. Coach Clark loves the running game, and he does, and they look to establish that. But you look at Zerrick Cooper, who started his college career at Clemson, and he threw for over 3,000 yards 2 straight years in a row. He threw for over 3,018 and 19 also. Two best years in Jacksonville State history of throwing the ball. Had 32 touchdowns the first year, 28 the second year. The 2 best in Jacksonville State history. So even though you look at it, and if he's healthy, which they say he is, and he is, I think they might look to throw the ball a little more than maybe Coach Gross has done, at some points, because you got a pretty special guy there, and they can do that. So yes, it's going to be important to him to establish the run, but when Cooper's in there, they're also going to sling the ball around the field too, because that's one thing they didn't have in the spring. They had Zion Webb, I think, who's out now with the knee injury.
That's right.
He played quarterback. I think he's a talented quarterback, but he's out with a knee injury now. But they didn't really have, they didn't have Zerrick Cooper really to do that in the spring. So I think they kind of went back to sort of his traditional way of relying on a running game and defense as much as you can. And So I expect him to see to throw the ball around a little bit too, and in addition to trying to run the football.
Definitely. And I was talking to my buddy, Jordan Smith, who actually played at Jacksonville State years and years ago. And I was talking to him a little bit earlier today just about, Zerrick Cooper and just Zion Webb. And he was telling me definitely that Zion Webb was more of the runner where Cooper can, sling it around. But he was also, telling me that, hey, Cooper's had some games where he's thrown multiple interceptions. I mean, every quarterback has those moments, but he has some games that he maybe tries to do a little too much, and I'm kind of hoping that might be what he does this Wednesday night, testing the UAB secondary, which is loaded, which we've talked about on previous episodes. So I like our chances if they do that.
Yeah, and I think any quarterback, I don't care who you are, when you get after a quarterback and make them feel uncomfortable, I don't care who you are, from Tom Brady to down. I think that if you make a quarterback feel uncomfortable, then they're going to make mistakes, or they're prone to make mistakes. And
right.
I think that's the one thing that obviously Coach Reeves and Coach Clark's defenses at UAB they've been built on. Make that guy uncomfortable, make him make some mistakes, and obviously with a great secondary, they can take advantage of that. But it starts up front, and it starts making them uncomfortable, and I think that's going to be the key. One of the big keys on Wednesday is make sure that Zerrick Cooper is not feeling comfortable. And the one thing that you also have to look at, and I don't know, I hadn't been to their practices or anything like that for Jacksonville State, but what kind of confidence does Zerrick Cooper have in his leg, type thing, or being hit? Sometimes
that's a good question.
When you come off a major injury, and I'm sure he's confident. I'm sure that it's fully healed, and especially with the way the medicine is these days. But still, when you're coming off a major injury, there's always a little bit of doubt in your mind. You might not admit it, and you might not, you might say the opposite, but just human nature is there's a little bit of doubt in your mind. And if you just keep hitting him play after play, then, that doubt kind of grows a little bit. So, I think that'll be a key, to make him as uncomfortable as you can. And, and they might play the freshman too. Matthew Caldwell's a kid out of Auburn High School. Yeah, freshman out of Auburn High School has apparently had from what I've understood, had a great camp. And certainly if he gets in there with a young kid like that, you're gonna, you'll need to get after him. I think he's a pretty mobile kid, and with a good arm, and I think he's going to be a real good player for him too. So I don't. Again, I think a big key is unleashing those guys up front, and just no matter who's in there, just make them as uncomfortable as possible.
Pressure. And, with Cooper, he's going to be the all-time leading passer in JSU history, more than likely this year, because he just needs 161 passing yards to break that record and become the all-time leader. But he's also dangerous on his legs, Steve. Just in 2020, in 4 games, he had 5 rushing touchdowns, so he can run around too. So
right,
but we'll be good up front for sure. Now Cooper was also named on the watch list for the Walter Payton Award for this year, which is given to the top offensive player in the FCS division. And of course you mentioned Matthew Caldwell. Now let's look at that running back for the Gamecocks. Josh Samuel, he's only 5'11", 215, so not a big guy, but he's definitely, a threat rushing the ball, but also catching the ball. They love to kind of swing him out and hit him, with some quick passes or some wheel routes. They like to get Samuel involved in the passing game as well. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye out, for him, and hope that our linebackers are, which I'm sure they will be, with an eye on him wherever he is on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to watch him. Now it does hurt them that, they had a kind of a really good 1-2 punch with him and Uriah Hall.
Yeah.
Uriah West.
West, Hall, that's right. Yeah.
Uriah Hall's a UFC fighter.
West.
Yeah, Uriah West. And Uriah West is, he's more of a bruiser. He's 225 pounds, and get after you pretty good. And he's hurt, and hadn't been practicing, and will be out, early in the season from what I understand. But they each of them last year had 8 touchdowns. And so it was a kind of a 1-2 thing of really pounding at you, and so that's going to hurt. They'll have another guy, Pat Jackson, was behind them. He rushed for 3 touchdowns, about 300 70 yards or so.
Mm-hmm.
But he's kind of similar to Samuel. He's 5'11", 215, I think, is what they list him at. And so they don't have the bruising guy that they had in Uriah West, which I'm sure, which hurts, but I do think that they're capable of running the ball. I do think they're good up front, and their offensive line's solid, I think, from what I understand. And so they're going to try to establish that. I mean, they will, but that's one thing that UAB. If UAB can make them one dimensional, anytime you can make, and that's any game. If you can make a team one dimensional, it helps a little bit. Now if that one dimension throws for 500 yards, then
no.
all of a sudden your advantage isn't that good. But
right.
But in this case, if they can make them as one dimensional as possible, then it certainly help.
And definitely, to note just a couple of those offensive linemen, Tylen Grable and Cam Hill on the offensive line for Jacksonville State, both were named preseason All-Sun players for this year. And it's kind of weird, too, seeing the A-Sun for the Gamecocks.
Yeah.
They've been in the Ohio Valley for so long, but looks like they're making the move to play in the A-Sun this year, and it looks like they're playing with Central Arkansas and a couple other good FCS schools. So good for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great move for their program to take a step up. They've really been the dominant program in Ohio Valley for quite a while now. I mean, there's been some others that have had years, that maybe they're right there, but I think the best team in that conference has certainly been Jacksonville State, over a long time now, several years now. So, but it's good. It's good to see them stepping up, and it's good for their program.
Definitely. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, Steve, for Jacksonville State, there's just a couple players that I definitely want to hit on, and one of those being safety Nicario Harper. Really talented safety, had 92 tackles in 13 games. He was the OVC Defensive Player of the Year, just really talented. I got, listened to him speak during the press conference for Jacksonville State leading up to the UAB game. But another guy, too, on that defensive line, which they've got a really good defensive line, but that defensive end, DJ Coleman, he had 55 tackles last year and 13 tackles for loss. And he was all OVC first-team defense for a second straight year again this year. So both of those guys really good, just studs on the defensive side of the ball for Jacksonville State.
Yeah, and Nicario Harper's started his college career at Southern Miss. That I think he went. I'm not sure if he went to JUCO or not, but I know he started at Southern Miss, and yeah, he's a guy that kind of leads them. I look forward to seeing him play. And then DJ Coleman's 6'6", 245 pound. Basically he plays their bandit position, which is like a jack linebacker. Mm-hmm. So we obviously know that that body type and that position, obviously we know that real well at UAB. So he's that kind of guy. He's gonna cause a lot of problems from the outside, and he's gonna you're gonna have to do some things to I don't know that you just put him on one game. Just put even though Kadeem Telford will probably be the guy that you have out there, and we'll see. We'll see how he can handle that, and if not, you'll have to maybe give him some help. But Kadeem is certainly
he's talented
enough to handle that challenge by himself, and we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens in that spot. And they Coleman, they can move Coleman around too. They might put him on the other side, and then then you have another experienced guy on the other side, and in Sidney Wells, and see what happens there, and and then also too, just alignment wise, often the UAB will line up with the two tight end type situation,
mm-hmm.
and so those guys will be out there to help too. So that'll be big though. That'll be a big part of the game, and I think I think a big part of that, and I say this all the time about UAB, and it's this is the kind of case too when you have a guy like DJ Coleman on the outside, when you can handle the inside with man on man type thing in the inside, and have your double teams a lot on the outside, that really means a lot. That's why UAB's had so much great pressure over these last several years is they've had guys like Garrett Marino and Tony Rush,
mm-hmm.
and Moultrie, inside, that are really pressuring inside, where you got to help somewhere, and you can't just help outside, because if you do, they're going to kill you inside. So
right,
I think that's going to be a key inside is making sure that, if you do have to double on the outside or help on the outside, that, you're doing a good job on the inside, and I think Umstead Sanders, one of the defensive end, one of the down guys for Jacksonville State. I think he started his career at Florida. I think he's capable. He's a 6'2", 250-pound guy that plays, with his hand on the ground. So he's quick, and, he had some, he was a starter for him and, last year, second team all conference. So he's a guy that you have to pay attention to. Both defensive tackles they played I think are capable guys. Jackson Luttrell and LaMelo Gordon, I think, are both capable guys of, that you're going to have to watch. And, and then Colby Fuqua on the other side is kind of a star position that they have on the other side. If he's a guy that started his career at Auburn, he's kind of a great athlete. I think he was a wide receiver at Auburn. But, if they start bringing him on the outside with his speed from the other side, that could cause some troubles. Now, he got hurt in the spring, and I think he only played three of their spring games. But, so they've got some pieces there that can cause you some problems.
Definitely. Well, I believe, Coach Clark said it best in his press conference for this game is that Jacksonville State, they're an FBS team playing in the FCS. These guys are loaded with talent. And to be honest, Steve, they can knock off a couple of these teams in our conference. Hell, they beat FIU last year, 19-10. So,
yeah, they did. So,
man.
Yeah, they're capable. There's no doubt. And they always have some guys that are bounce backs from Power 5 programs. Right. Markel Benton, the weak side linebackers, played at Alabama for 3 years, and he was there last year, and I think he was third on a team with 69 tackles, I believe it was 69 or 70 tackles. He's 6'2", 230 weak side linebacker that'll get after you. That was like, again, he played at Alabama. He was a contributor at Alabama, so. They have some of those bounce back guys, and they have some guys. Marshall Clark's a guy, their inside linebacker that, he was second on team with 85 tackles last year, and you look at him and he's 6 foot 210, and which is for your FBS sort of level, that's a little small. For the most part, that's not much smaller than Noah Wilder or whatever, but still, he might be. Coming out of high school, some of the bigger schools might have looked at him and said, he's a little too small, but he can play, and he's got 85, like I say, he had 82nd on team with 85 tackles last year. So he'll make plays in there. So they got guys, one of their cornerbacks, George Steele, is from Hewitt Trustville. And I remember him in high school and was super, I just think he's a guy that was kind of on the verge of getting an FBS scholarship, I would think, and, so there's a lot of guys there. There's certainly a lot of guys there, and they have some local, kind of some local Birmingham kids that are on the two deep that I think would, want to show some things. To a couple guys that we didn't mention on the offense that I saw in high school a lot were a couple Thompson high school receivers, Michael Petway, who actually started his career at Washington State, and then Ahmad Edwards. Ahmad Edwards at in his senior year at Thompson set the state record for catches in a season. It was, it was 108 or it was over 100. And he's so those are two guys that are really talented guys, the local guys that might want to sort of show out against the local team sort of thing. So they got a couple minor high kids that are playing the secondary that I think are good players. So, there's just talent throughout. Now we'll see the depth. We'll see what the depth situation is. And we've talked about this in the past. And I just think that depth is going to be a strength for UAB throughout. And I'm not just talking about playing an FCS team. I think it's going to be a big advantage for them in conference play, provided that they stay healthy enough to have the depth. If you start losing guy after guy, then that's a little different, even though you get into some, the depth helps at that point, but you don't have the depth behind it after that. So, it'll be interesting to see Wednesday night. I almost said Saturday night. I do not want to wait till Saturday. Wednesday's fine with me. Yes. But Wednesday night it'd be interesting to see if that depth issue does show right away.
And that's kind of where I was going to go next, talking about the depth on the Jacksonville State side. I mean, it is what it is. The FCS, they don't have as many scholarship, slots as an FBS team does. So, I mean, it is what it is. So you go back to Jacksonville State and you look at the Florida State game they played this past fall. I mean, they led that game, the whole first half and part into the third quarter. But midway through that third quarter, man, they just looked gassed. And, I mean, you could tell they were just tired because it was almost the same guys out there all time. Even if you watch the FIU game, I mean, FIU had a chance, especially in that late third quarter, fourth quarter, to possibly even, get the comeback and beat Jacksonville State. So definitely just off of those two games, you can see the depth kind of trail off for Jacksonville State. So I don't want Blazer fans to be concerned. I mean, I hope this isn't the case, but if we're in a dogfight going into halftime and we're only up by, 7 points or so, don't be concerned because, I mean, this is a hell of a ball club for Jacksonville State. But come second half, those guys should be, getting tired and, hopefully we can pound the rock some with Dwayne McBride and company and kind of wear them out even more. So I don't want Blazer fans to get concerned if it's a close game going into halftime, especially, and we're going to talk about this in a minute about play calling, but I don't want people to get concerned if it is close at the half. Now, I do think UAB should pull away pretty well in the second half and hopefully win by double digits, hopefully. But I just don't want people to get concerned if it's a close game early on.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with that a little bit, but I think if you're not concerned about this game, you're crazy. I think this is a good football team, and they're number 4 in the country in FCS, and there's not a whole lot of depth, and like you talked about wearing them down, but sometimes, especially early in the season, you can sort of play through that depth, because your body is still pretty fresh, even though, like I said, you've been through 4 hard weeks, but you're still pretty fresh, and your mind can tell you, hey, I'm going to work through this, and especially when things are going good for you. It's kind of like when App State beat Michigan. Now, if you look at it, they probably weren't a whole lot different. Well, there was different talent wise, but that was a great App State team. But still, your mind will tell you early in the season that, hey, I'm not tired. Hey, things are going good. We're going to win this game. Where midway through the season or late in the season, a lot of times we're when Coach Clark likes to play some of these bigger teams late in the season, your body's beat up and you're tired and you're sort of saying opposite it sometimes. If one thing goes bad, you're like, oh boy, here we go, sort of thing. So I think I'm very concerned. Because I think it's a good team. Now, if this was Savannah State, I would say no, I'm not that concerned. And really, even Central Arkansas last year, even though I think Central Arkansas had they weren't bad, but there was no point going into the game where I thought to myself, UAB is going to lose this ball game. No point. And really, even during the game, because everything that happened during the game, the score was more UAB's self-induced mistakes that it should have been a lot more lopsided than it was. And I think that I think Central Arkansas had some talent. Now, don't get me wrong, they got a couple NFL guys, but overall, I just didn't think they had a depth. This Jacksonville State team is so much better than that team overall. In my opinion, because I think they do have a little better depth than, or not a little bit. I think they have better depth than Central Arkansas. I think they have some better players, other than, Rochelle and a couple of the receivers for Central Arkansas that I thought were pretty, special for that level. I just think this team's just a little different. This team's, Coach said it. This team's basically a group of 5 team, and
it is.
So I think you'd be concerned no matter what. But I will say, I wouldn't come out of this game if I don't care if it's 2-0 and you win on a safety.
If it's a win, hey.
If it's a win, I think you just say, well, hey, we got to win. Let's move forward. Let's move on with this thing. Now 2-0, okay, 2-0 I'd be concerned with. But if it's a fairly close game, or a real close game, and you get a win, I have no concern moving forward because you got to win against a pretty good team. It's the opener. It's the opener after a strange season last year, and the other thing that we don't know right now we won't know until warm up is, are there guys that are going to miss these games? Is there a situation where a guy gets a late test or because that's going to happen again. It's not going to happen like it happened last year because we're not going to have the contact tracing, but it is going to happen. It's going to happen if somebody tests positive, and that's going to happen in this world. I mean, and that certainly isn't just because you're a college football player. I mean, that's what's going on in this world right now, and so we don't know some of that. And in some cases, honestly, they don't know some of that. Somebody gets the test on Monday or Tuesday, whatever day. I'm not sure what they're doing test wise. I don't know how they're set it up right now, but it could happen, and it could happen to either team, and it could happen any week. So, to me, is in this game, I'm happy as long as there's a win and you move forward and because I think this is a pretty good team they're playing. I know this is a pretty good team they're playing.
It is, yeah. Nothing but respect for the Jacksonville State program right now. I mean, they're doing really well under Gross and will continue to do well under Gross. Now, one other thing, Steve, that I wanted to hit on is, you go back to the 2019 game when we played FCS Alabama State and a little bit back to Central Arkansas last year. But how do you think Clark will approach it play calling wise? Because, I mean, you go back to the Alabama State game and it was just super vanilla. I mean, this game, I feel he's got to take some shots. I mean, he's got to open up that playbook a little bit, to get by this game. I mean, he's not going to be able to just halfback dive, 90% of the time and get out of there with a W.
Yeah, no, I think he can. I think he plays it by ear. I really do. I think he goes into it with the thought of, hey, I'm going to do what I think we do best, and that's run the football. And if you can run the football, I think you stay with it. And maybe try to hit some shots down the field. And if you can't, then you open it up some. And I think that's the advantage though of having such a veteran team. And I think there is an advantage there of kind of, you can change on the fly a little bit. I mean, you can come in and say, okay, this is what we're doing. And if it doesn't work out, or if it's not working out to your expectations, then you can sort of change and do some different things, and the players aren't going to panic. I think if it's a real young team and you go in and you tell them, hey, we're going to pound the ball at them all night long, and this is how we're going to win the game, and in 3 series in, you don't have a first down, and and you can't run the ball, and then all of a sudden you go, hey, we're going to have to start throwing the ball. Then they get kind of wide-eyed, like, well, wait a minute, you said we could do this. With a veteran team, a lot of times you can do that. You can flip that switch a little bit and say, especially when there's some proven guys that have proven to be able to do it. With obviously Tyler Johnston and even though the receivers are young, I mean, you have Shropshire's coming off the big game. You have some guys that I think are capable. You can flip that a little bit, but I do think that the game plan going in, particularly, is going to be establish that run, but you say that every week with them. I mean, that I don't care who's across the line. I mean, honestly, to a point, the game plan is going to be try to establish a run against Georgia. Try. Right. Obviously, that's a little different than establish a run against, I guess anybody in Conference USA and certainly Jacksonville State, but I do think that's going to be the plan coming in, but they're still not going to go away from trying to take a few shots downfield. I mean, I don't think that this day and age, I don't think you really try to hide that much, unless you're playing a team that like you said, Alabama State, certainly Savannah State, games like that, you really don't have to. In this case, I mean, I always go back to to sort of the philosophy of, if you don't win this one, you can't get to the next one, kind of like the playoff philosophy, you got to win this to get to the next one. It's kind of that way in these openers like this is, yeah, you do get to the next one, but it's different. If you're coming off a loss to, an FCS team. So I think there'll be, I think it'll be just a typical UAB game. I mean, I think it'll be a typical our game plan. Just try to establish that run. Your defense is going to make some plays for you. You know that you're going to be able to make some plays downfield. They're going to. They're going to, with Tyler Johnson in there, they're going to be able to make some plays downfield. Now, what you don't do, in my opinion, is show some packages you might have with, say, Dylan Hopkins. Or packages you might have with a slot guy, or package you may have with your main Brown at running back, or just right. certain things that are kind of a little out of the ordinary of what you usually do. I don't think you show a lot of that, unless unless you're in a situation that where you have to. But I think there's a lot of that a lot of things that we don't even know. I mean, I just threw those out examples of things that might happen. They might not do any of that, but they certainly have some packages in their mind or in their offense that are a little non-traditional for them, that they might use down the road that you don't show that first week. And I don't care who you're playing, you probably don't show that the first week. You play in Georgia the first week, you probably don't show that. Because you're looking big big picture type thing. So right. So we'll see. But again, I think it's a typical game plan. You try to establish that running game and play a lot of great defense, and go from there.
And then one last thing I wanted to mention about Jacksonville State, watching a lot of their games this spring, is they were penalized a lot. I mean, there were a lot of unsportsmanlike penalties. There were a lot of personal foul penalties. I think they're one of the most penalized teams in the FCS under John Gross. Now, years past, we've had some of that same, aggressiveness, on UAB side, where we've been hit with some, late hits every once in a while. But that's definitely something to watch. Another thing to watch this Wednesday night for Jacksonville State, to see if we can kind of rattle them a little bit and get them to commit some of those personal fouls, and just hope that, we're smart on our side of the ball and don't do any of that, which I hope we won't, and I don't see us doing that. But I think that's enough on Jacksonville State. Steve, now I was going to ask you to, before we wrap up, I know UAB released their 2-deep for the Jacksonville State game. Did anything stand out to you on that 2-deep?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a couple things. I mean, I think Jermaine Brown and
Dwayne,
Dwayne McBride being an oar there. I think I think that shows more of just how good a camp that Jermaine Brown has than Dwayne McBride not having a good camp. Even though I think McBride is still your guy. I mean, I think he's still your guy there. But I was a little surprised to see that. A little bit. Mac McWilliams, I knew that he'd been having a great camp, and but see him as the starters, as of now the starter at the one corner, I was a little surprised and very happy for him, because I think he's really done that. Keandre Swoops, I think that having Swoops at as number one at the star guy, and I'm not surprised. I mean, because he's really, really played well, and I think he played well. He's played well, every time he's gotten a chance, and he had a big play in the championship game where on a 2-point conversion, and just, I think he's a solid player. So I was kind of surprised and happy to see that. Not surprised, but happy to see that. I thought it was interesting that Mole and Will Bowler are both listed as oars at that safety, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Those two great players, and two players that have to be on the field. Really need to be on the field for them. Other than that, I don't think there was any, huge surprise. I mean, to me, I'm not, especially with a team like this, I've never been a really huge guy on depth charts anyway, because just it's a lot of it's game situation. A lot of it is, the guy that's a little healthier than the next guy. A lot of it is just, performance, whether it be in practice or games. So I'm never really one that gets caught up on depth charts, even though they interest me like for everybody else. But, I think with this team, the depth chart really doesn't matter that much, because I think there's so many situations that they're going to I think they have so much variety that they can throw out there in certain situations. And it's all going to be all about performance. Literally going to be all about performance, because there's been some years that I've seen at UAB and everywhere where you've got a guy that's maybe underperforming a little bit from his capability of what he is, but there's really nobody pushing him behind him. He's just that much better than the guy behind him, and you don't really take him out. I mean, you just kind of look at it. I mean, I use the example of a guy like Marvin Burdett when he was at UAB. Now he didn't, he never had games where he took off, but if he did, they wouldn't have taken him out of the game because he was so much better than the guy behind him that they wouldn't take him out. Now he never did, but I'm just saying that's kind of an example of, in this case, and that's one thing that did jump out to me about this depth chart. I'm looking at that depth chart, especially defensively, and I'm thinking, okay, well, there's the starter, and I'm looking at the guy behind him and going, okay, there's really not any difference between those two. They go to the next position, they go, okay, well, there's really not any difference between those three, and go to the next position and go, well, there's never really any difference, so I think that was the one thing that kind of jumps out, especially defensively. I think, in a couple offensive positions, I think offensive line, I think the starters, for the most part, are pretty clearly ahead right now, other than center, where I think both those guys are really even. And, and I think Jacoby Jones is so versatile that you almost don't want him challenging one of the starters, because he's so versatile, because he can do he can do so much.
Right.
But I mean, I think defensively, honestly, I mean, I'm looking at that, and I'm talking about every position I looked at, and was saying, okay, well, there's really no difference there. Really no difference there. And so that was kind of cool. I mean, that's kind of cool to see, and I think that's going to help. And kind of what we talked about with the COVID situation. If somebody misses, there's you still have depth and quality depth there. And then injuries, or guys that are banged up, certainly you're going to have, you don't worry about the guy coming in next, so that's one thing that kind of jumped out. But, like I say, I mean, depth charts to me are interesting to talk about, but when it comes down to it, it's a matter of who's on the field. It doesn't really matter that much. That does to the players, but it doesn't matter that much who runs out there first. It's who's out there last, who's out there during the important times.
Definitely. Well, guys, I'll be heading down to the Crampton Bowl this Wednesday, so I can't wait to see some of you guys there. Again, the game is 6:30 p.m. Central Time, televised on ESPN. Hopefully, you guys can make it down to the Crampton Bowl, but if not, you'll be able to watch on ESPN. But make sure you have your radio on, too, on Jocks 94.5, starting at 5:30 for the UAB Jacksonville State game. But, guys, setting up the show, probably expect Friday morning-ish. We'll have a recap episode to tell you, hopefully, about how UAB was able to get that victory over Jacksonville State. But make sure that if you're not following us on Twitter, give us a follow at twitter.com/BlazerPod, and make sure to subscribe to us on a podcast platform, whether that's Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google, wherever. Just make sure you hit that follow, subscribe button to make sure you get your podcast straight to your device, so you don't have to go out and find us each time we drop an episode. But on that note, guys, we'll see you out at the Crampton Bowl, and go Blazers.